Hello everybody.
Dear children, hope you all are fine. Yes, I'm giving you some more descriptions about Shaheen Mistry in this video. See, already we have studied about Irfan Alam and what actually he had started in India and why he wanted to have such a foundation or company here, and what was he doing by this, what was he aimed at. In this way, another entrepreneur like personality Shaheen Mistry, she is an Indian social activist and educationist, and she also founded a foundation like an Indian company called Akanksha Foundation, and by this company she wanted to educate poor backward children throughout India. See, as a young entrepreneur, she started this foundation here, and that had grown, and now it has become a full-fledged company in India. Let us hear from her. Shaheen Mistry herself speaks about her own story. Okay, now you all listen.
I lived for the first 18 years of my life outside of India, and when I was 12, we lived in Indonesia. And I remember, I have a terrible memory, so I don't remember much, but I do remember this moment when I was sitting in our garden in Indonesia, and I had a diary at that time, and I was writing in my diary. And years later, when I started my organization, Akanksha, I was trying to prepare something different for a staff meeting. And so I went through all these old papers and documents, and I found this diary. And I think what I'm going to share with you is not a very good poem. It's a poem I wrote. I was just 12. But in my mind, it sowed the seeds for what I was going to do later. Yeah? So that poem, and this goes back a long time, 1983, was said, I reached to touch a rainbow today, I reached up high, so high, and yet as high as I reached up, I could not touch the sky. I'll reach to touch a rainbow again, I'll reach up higher than high, and if I try to reach up high, I just may skim the sky. So I felt very, very lucky that at the age of 12, I sort of knew what I wanted to do. And from 12, every summer vacation, I would volunteer. And in retrospect, I can now connect the dots. At that time, I didn't really know what motivated me to do it. But every summer, I spent my summers working with kids who were visually impaired, hearing impaired. When we lived in the US, I worked with autistic kids. When we lived in Indonesia, I worked with really severely handicapped kids who lived in an orphanage. And I just remember lots and lots of joy. Just really like loving being around kids and knowing that like somewhere like this is what I'm going to do. But when I was 18, I came back to India, and it was again very random, like the giving out of the flowers. I was here and I'd finished my first year at Tufts University, and I was about to go back for my second year, and my family had already gone. I had my flight booked to go a week later, and I walked into a community, and luckily I actually had a camera with me on the first day that I ever went into a community, and this is the first child that I met. Her name's Pinky. I have no idea where she is, and it's not a great picture, but I want you to just look at her. Looking at Pinky's eyes were really symbolic of what I believed. They were sparkling and shining and bright, and they spoke to me of potential. And as I walked into the community, I expected to feel a lot of things. I expected to feel really saddened by the poverty, really upset because I had lived a life of a lot of privilege and I'd had every possible thing I wanted growing up and all the support ever. I grew up not knowing that there were problems in the world. And when I go into a community, I just felt that something's wrong. Like something's really wrong in a world where so many kids are denied the opportunity to meet their potential. And so I would walk in the community and yes, saddened by the dirt and the filth and the poverty, but much more than that, I'd be surprised by the resourcefulness, the resilience, the gratitude that I saw in spaces where I would constantly say, but if I was in that position, like, really, like, what would I do, you know? And what would I be able to do with my life? And so Pinky, I lost touch with her a couple of years after I met her, but she remains a really big inspiration to me and just a symbol of the potential that's there in every single child in our country. And like, I really believe that I want to spend my life working so that every kid in the country has the opportunity to be sitting where you are today, right? Like, why can't that be possible for every single kid? It's the kind of opportunities that you and I had growing up. A safe space to be kids, a place where they can explore who they want to be, and a place where they can just have fun, where they're not burdened with things that an 8-year-old and 10-year-old kid are not supposed to be burdened with. So that's how we started. It was a very, very, very simple idea, Akanksha. Basically, I said, like, we don't need to do anything. Everything we need exists in our country. All we need to do is create a platform to bring these things together. So I saw resources everywhere. The biggest resource I saw were the kids and the minds and hearts of just hundreds and thousands of kids who needed to be educated, more importantly, who wanted to be educated. And I thought, what a resource, right? At the same time, I'd come back from the US and I was in Xavier's College and nobody went to class. And it shocked me because at Tufts University, everyone attended class. Xavier's College, everyone sat in the canteen. And then 1 month before the exams, everyone would go out, buy their textbooks, and start attending class. And I would look around at all these like young, driven, high energy, bright people. And then I'd see all these huge problems in the country. And somewhere I was like, this is not making sense, right? So that was the second resource. Bright, young, talented people who maybe just needed to get fired up about a mission, right? And it was fascinating for me because I would go around in the canteen and I would you in India, you know? And everyone had an answer. Like, for some it was like the environment, gender, corruption, education, health. And then my next question would be, so, like, why aren't you doing anything about it? And the response, like 99% of the time, was we really want to do something about it. We don't know what to do. We don't know how we as one person can make a difference. So it just seemed really easy to me. We have kids who need to be educated. We have young college students who are unbelievably bright and can educate. Let's bring them together. Okay, Bombay, difficult to find spaces, but again, I saw resources everywhere. So in a place where you have to really look for space and Bombay is so cramped, I began to realize that so many schools run in single shifts. What's happening to those classrooms after school hours, right? So again, that seemed like an untapped resource. And then my belief always has been, if you do what you need to do well, with the right intent, money's gonna come, right? And we didn't need much money. First 5 years, we were all volunteers anyway. So Akanksha was just about bringing together these things. We started our first small center. Again, it's another funny story similar to what Aditya said. I went to 20 different schools trying to find classrooms to house our first Akanksha center. All 20 schools said no. It renewed my faith in what I needed to do because school principals, these were like high-end, rich convent school principals, were saying things like, this idea is very revolutionary, and I'm thinking, really? I mean, I know it was 20 years ago, but basic education was not a revolutionary idea. They were saying things like, our kids in the morning will get diseases from sitting on the same benches as your kids. So I realized very early on that the biggest fights were going to be not the work, not the collecting of resources, but the changing of mindsets. And the 20th school I went to, I was about to give up. And I walked into Father Emil de Cruz's office I didn't know Father Emil de Cruz. This was the Holy Name School in Mumbai. And I walked in and I said, I've used this line a lot in my life. It's a good line to remember. Father, my life is in your hands. And poor Father was so taken aback that he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, if I don't get a classroom, I have this idea. There are these kids who want to be educated, but frankly, it's all in your hands. Like whether they get educated or not depends on whether you give us these classrooms or not. So we started, and I found the minute we started, like people jump on board, right? So when Father met me and he said yes, he said, so when do you want to start? And I said, tomorrow. And I had no clue of how we'd start the next day. I didn't have teachers. I didn't have a bus. I'd identified some group of kids, but I didn't even know if they would come. But I was so terrified that if I gave him more time, he'd change his mind and take away the space that I just said, we have to start tomorrow. And I went back to college and I sat with my friends, most of whom really had no interest in kids at all. And I said, can you just pretend like you love kids and just come in and pretend to be teachers so that Father thinks that we're a real team, and in the meantime, I'll find teachers. And it was literally that. I'd walk around with hand-painted posters saying, you can make a difference from classroom to classroom and sign up volunteers. And really, that's sort of how we started. So when I think about that, the idea that 90% of our potential as a nation is not being maximized, I really feel a little bit sick in my stomach. Right? It makes me really, really angry. And it makes me angry for many, many reasons. I'm just going to share two. One is a moral obligation, right? I have two young daughters. What did they do to deserve being born into the situation that they were in? Or what did I do to deserve being born in the situation I did? And what has that child in the slums done to deserve being born there? Nothing. Nothing. It's just a flip of a coin. It's just luck. That's it. And because of that, I feel like a huge moral obligation to say it's just not fair. We need to do something so that every single kid has that chance. What they choose to do with that chance is in their hands. We need to give them that chance. And the second reason it makes me so angry is when I think about it from our nation's perspective. When I think of where India is today and where it needs to go, and I think about that loss of potential, that's frightening, right? How can we stand up and feel proud of ourselves as a nation when we know that we live with that kind of inequity? And then on the much more positive side, if you flip that on its head, what a massive opportunity we have. Imagine if every single person in this room was standing at the end of that exercise. Where would we be in our own happiness, in our own lives, and as a nation? And I think that's what drives the work that we actually do.
And now you listen to her. See how beautifully she narrated her story. She has given us all the background information, and that led her to think about it and form such a company here. Now you read the story given in our textbook titled as Didi. Here also we see the presentation, what actually she had told, that things that we see in this story also. And after reading, we all will have a correct idea about this company. Okay. Now we have to do these related activities given in the textbook. First of all, we have to complete the question answers. First, let us respond session. There are some questions under this title, let us respond. So now first question.
What was Shaheen's first impression of orphanage? In the orphanage, she saw crying children, laughing children, quiet children, and screaming children. She was confused. She saw the iniquity of life there. Number 2. Why does she say that life wasn't perfect during summer vacation? She says that life was not perfect during summer vacation because her summers were spent between the orphanage in Jakarta and trips back to Mumbai. In Mumbai, she saw the extreme poverty and children begging for food. Number 3. What was the search Shaheen had in her childhood? How was India answering it? The search she had in her childhood was finding ways to help the kids in need. India was answering it because in India she found many children begging on the streets for food. She knew she could help them to live better lives. Number 4. What do you understand by the expression manicured reality of my university life? Manicure means caring for the fingers and nails. Manicure reality is polished reality. As one who has studied in India, especially in the crowded Mumbai, the author felt her university life in the USA was manicured, highly polished. Number 5. On what conditions did Shaheen's parents allow her to stay back in India? They put forward two conditions. She would get admission into a good undergraduate college in the city and later she would go abroad for her graduate degree. Number 6. How did Shaheen get her admission to St. Xavier's even when the admissions were closed? I would say she forced the principal to admit her. She entered the principal's room through a side door before the surprised principal, Father De Cruz, could open his mouth. She said to him, "Father, my life is in your hands. I want to do something for the children of India. I don't know how, only what I must." The principal asked her a few questions and she was admitted. Number 7. What was the condition of Mumbai slums? It was horrible. The slum once Shaheen walked into was a sprawling, low income community which was a maze of small alleyways. It was full of life. Some 10,000 people lived there without running water, no system of waste disposal, and shared 6 dark cubicle toilets in one alley. Number 8. How was Sandhya's life different from that of Shaheen? Sandhya's life was utterly different from that of Shaheen. Like Shaheen, she was also 18. Sandhya knew no English and Shaheen knew no Hindi. But Sandhya, wearing a sari, smiled, laughed, and chatted a lot. Sandhya's home was smaller than the bathroom of Shaheen's house. Number 9. What is the basic principles of Akanksha? The basic principle of Akanksha is providing underprivileged children with opportunities for learning. Akanksha wants the classroom to be just a safe place for the children where they can forget, at least for some time, their troubles at home and study and also enjoy. Akanksha came into existence in 1991. It started with the 15 children. Now it has 3,500 children with 58 centers and 6 schools. The children are taught, apart from English and maths, values, self-esteem and confidence. Question number 10. What did the volunteers teach at Akanksha? At Akanksha, the volunteers teach the underprivileged children basic English and maths and also values, self-esteem and confidence. Number 11. What kind of difference do you think Akanksha must have brought in the slums? Now the slum dwellers know the importance of education. They also know the importance of hygiene and decent living. They have realized that they too can rise higher in the society with education, determination and hard work. Akanksha has provided people with hopes and dreams. Question number 1. What kind of problems did Shaheen face when she settled in India? She faced a lot of problems when she settled in India. She wanted to help the underprivileged people of slums, especially children. She wanted to teach them, but finding a place was difficult. She went to 20 schools asking them to give room just for 3 hours in the morning to teach these poor children. All of them refused. Some thought the idea of teaching underprivileged children was too revolutionary. Some thought the children would spread diseases to other students. A principal of a reputed school even said that the glass bangles worn by the poor children would scratch the fine desk. Finally, when she was about to give up, the principal of Holy Name High School in Colaba agreed to give her room. That was the first Akanksha Center. Question number 2. What was the iniquity that she found in India? She found a lot of iniquity in India. In a city like Mumbai, where some of the world's richest men live, there are also dirty slums where people live in conditions in which even animals would not live. One of the slums she visited was a sprawling, low-income community which was a maze of small alleyways, full of life. Some 10,000 people lived there without running water, no system of waste disposal, and shared 6 dark cubicles toilets in one alley. She says the house of Sandhya was smaller than her bathroom. This is iniquity indeed. Question 3. Why do you think the principals of different schools refuse to give a space for the children from the slum? Shaheen says that the principals often gave illogical and even silly reasons for not giving a space for the children from the slum. Some thought the idea of teaching underprivileged children was too revolutionary. Some thought the children would spread diseases to other students. A principal of a reputed school even said that the glass bangles worn by the poor children would scratch the fine desks in the classroom. Number 4. Shaheen refers to Indian education system as bookish. Comment on this. Shaheen is very right in saying that the Indian education system is bookish. We lay stress on book learning. We give a lot importance to studying things by heart. The examinations also check our memory and not our competence in doing things. Theory is given much more importance than the practice. We may know a lot about America and England, but may not know the things in our immediate locality.